Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Reinsurance Podcast. I am your co-host, Jared Lee.
Injured co-host, as we call it. I'm the other co-host, Ben Rose, and we're joined by a special guest.
Jessica McCausland from Supercede. Welcome.
Hi, guys. What's the crack?
So today we brought Jess on today. We wanted to dive into something that's kind of a niche category in technology in our space, but how do we talk about client success? And more importantly, how do we lean into this narrative of companies who not just buy software, but sort of get the most out of it? How do they extract the most value? How do they ensure what they buy actually delivers value to their team? And there's no one in the world better at this job than our very own Jessica McCausland. So welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, guys. Oh my God, it's so great to be here, be in the hot seat, and just see where the magic happens with the Reinsurance podcast.
How do you like the studio? We've decorated it and tidied it specially for you.
I love it. Love the plants, love the purple. Definitely my kind of vibe.
Yeah.
Fabulous. We thought it's probably best to start today's episode I think the term is disambiguation, but it could not be, so don't quote me on that. But to unpack and describe, what does client success actually mean?
And it's great, and I can't believe it's taken me sort of this long, or taken us this long to come onto this topic. Well, one of the reasons being that, client success, I'm sure there's a lot of people now who are listening being like, well, okay, cool, what is client success? And really, as people, we kind of, we try to associate that with things we already know. So for example, you say, what is client success? The immediate go-to, especially if you're in financial services and insurance, reinsurance, you think typically of account management or, the service desk or client support. And really, actually, it's not any of those things, in fact. So really, we're here to kind of dispel the myths of, what it isn't. So as I'm saying, it's not account management, it's not relationship management, it's not those lovely support desk people. It's really so much more.
So hang on, so you just said many, many things that client success is not. So should we pause and unpack what those things are first, just so everyone's keeping up to speed? Because as we may discuss on today's episode, quite a few of most clients perhaps in the industry won't have had a client success person before, because most clients or insurance companies, etc., won't have bought technology from somewhere else before, because so many of these firms do it in-house themselves the first few times that they build something. So you mentioned client support, account management. What do they sort of deal with that isn't client success?
Well, their functions, so typically, so when you go and buy software, so you buy software or buy a SaaS, software as a solution, what usually happens is you buy the thing, and traditionally you were given an account manager, and that account management role would be a sort of reactive role, the same with a support function. So it's not until the client needs something, so they need help with the technology, they need help with training, or they need help with something's gone wrong, or they need, from the account management perspective, it's I need more users, or it's time for your renewal, I'm getting in touch with you, but very much a reactive function. So client success kind of come back to sort of in the early noughties is actually with sort of the bigger software providers. They were noticing that, clients were buying their software and spending a lot of money on this software and not really getting value from it. They were then turning into what's called a churn risk. If we've used that terminology before, essentially it just means they weren't going to renew, and the software companies were like, that is revenue, that's money in the door. How do we keep that money, but also we want to grow that client as well? How do we actually grow the client and the partner? And that's really where some of these companies came up with some teams called dive and catch. It's quite fun, right? Dive and catch.
I hadn't heard that before.
Give them a group hug, big hug. Be like, no, stay, don't let me go, or don't let them go. And that's really where client success was born. So it's all about the ability to be the client's strategic partner. So the people that typically work in client success have this sort of strategic project management mindset. And it's all about being proactive. So earlier when we were talking about account management, the service, it's all about a reactive function. Client success is being proactive. So it's thinking 3, 5, 10 steps ahead with the client on how best they're going to get value.
Yeah.
Because really, you're investing in something. You buy this technology, you're investing a lot of money, first and foremost, but then a lot of time and effort into something. And then the client success manager that'll come along with you on that journey is, how do you get the most out of that investment?
Yeah.
All right. And we think about investments as well as people. Some people, you invest in something, you're like, yeah, I'll put it under the pillow there, not think about it. Or actually you can be strategic about it. Be like, no, I'm not going to just put my money under a pillow, think about it in 10 years. From a perspective of someone buying software, it's like, how do you get the best out of this? And that's what the client success manager is there for.
Yeah.
You've bought something expensive. You've bought something for a reason. That's really the issue. Like, taking the money aside is actually, you bought this for a reason, a tangible reason enough to make this big decision. The client success manager is there to help you make the most of that. And that's really fun.
Well, I think you're seeing as well this evolution of that role alongside the evolution of how technology is sold. You mentioned SaaS being one, but if we go sort of how software is sold pre-SaaS, it didn't require this function really to exist, because it was like, here's your multi-million pounds up front. We're going to put the software on-prem for you. Your own IT team's going to sort of maintain it. And we might have a call center that helps you work on bug fixes, or you might pay us each year to add new features. There's little elements of that. But when you look at how SaaS is sold, part of the value proposition there is, if you do not like this solution you've purchased, you can just not renew. You can churn, as you said. And so it changes the importance of where this function sits to be one that goes, well, if we want to have happy clients, we want those clients to continue to grow with us, how do we not only just give them like a call number that they can call at any time, but how do we make sure that they're extracting the most value from what they've purchased, and they continue to sort of use it more and more and get more and more value out of it? So it's almost a component that exists because of SaaS, but because of our industry having a less familiarity with this as a category, I think this is why this sort of function doesn't exist in a lot of places, because the historical model is like, well, we just give them a call center and they call that number if they get confused. And that's not really the point anymore, is it?
Yeah, I really loved your analogy, actually, of an investment. It made me think of something which is going to introduce another member of my family to the podcast. Hooray. But you're not buying an investment as like a stock in this case, right? It's not something you just want to put to one side and hope that it becomes more valuable. You're buying something with a purpose. Like, there's a reason you went out to get it. And my dad is notorious for doing this. So sorry, Dad, you're getting called out here, but he'll buy like a very fancy bike with electric gears and all this sort of thing, with the intention to go and actually ride that bike and take it out regularly. But I think he really needs a client success person post-purchase to make sure that he actually takes that bike and goes on bike rides, because he doesn't schedule it or otherwise. So, Dad, you've made it on the podcast. Enjoy. But it's exactly this kind of thing. I am so guilty when I go out and trial some software or buy some software, of putting it to one side because it's not my normal BAU activity to use it. You need somebody who's actually going to sit down with you and say, right, why have you bought this? What are you hoping is going to be achieved or be different next year because you bought this, and how can I help you get there? Where are we going to work together to make sure you actually get the outcomes that you wanted from buying this fancy bike that cost you a fortune, so that you don't go, there it is, gathering dust in the garage. Maybe I should put it on eBay and sell it at the end.
I think this function also is super important. And again, we have a lot of listeners who also are other startups and technology founders and things. But in our industry, it's also super important because as part of this role as well, you get like a first-hand experience or information around how clients are using it and what other problems they're trying to solve with it. Because one of the default actions people have when they buy software is they bought it for this thing and they had this other problem that doesn't really work in your platform, but they're just trying to use your platform to solve for it anyway. And it's the sort of like forcing the square peg into the round hole kind of scenario. But when you're working with clients much more closely, you're able to sort of listen to those stories and understand how they're also deploying the product and what other things they're trying to do with it. And it becomes an immensely valuable source of insight into how we develop the product. Unlike the bike, the software can change every sort of few weeks and add new things. So it's an unbelievably valuable insight tool and channel into what we should build next and what our what our clients also want to be able to do alongside the stuff that they're doing at the point of purchase, which is probably something interesting as well.
Yeah.
How does the journey typically start then? Because you get presumably the sales folks are like, got a potential client coming on, heading your way. What's the first conversation with somebody who's like either buying or thinking about buying Supercede, for example?
Yeah. Well, the conversation typically goes, well, the first thing is I'll say, hi, I'm Jess. I'm going to be your client success manager. Fun story to a real example of that happening. So I introduce myself and the client, the prospect goes, it's like, Jess, I don't know what a client success manager does, but I like the idea of someone managing my success. Now, they probably don't sound like that at all. It's a very bad impression. But actually, to your point about like what you said about your dad, Ben, it's exactly right. It's like this person, I have no idea what you're going to do or what you're going to talk to me about, but actually, I like the idea of someone managing this process for me. And that's exactly it. Client success are the gatekeepers, I would say, of the client life cycle. So the client life cycle, you've got the pre-sale, post-sale stages, if we were to make it very simple there. That pre-sale stage, you're right, that's business development and that's sales. And then you've got the post-sale stage, which is traditionally actually where client success come in to that process. So a lot of people listening, that'll make sense. So pre-sale, it's all about the sales side. Post-sale, it'll be account management, client success, etc. I think, so using sort of what I'm doing though, specifically in what we're doing, I suppose, is client success are actually getting involved in the pre-sale stage.
Okay.
And it really depends on the type of, again, the SaaS product that you have. So again, there's no right or wrong way to do this, but you need to do what makes sense for the clients and the people that you're dealing with.
Yeah.
And I'm dealing with reinsurance people, and I'm sure we've covered it many a time on the podcast as well. When you're dealing with reinsurance, insurance people, what's one of the core things about this? Your relationships. Solidifying those relationships, making long-term partnerships, relationships that are going to last, because this is really going to be a marathon. We're not sprinting with a piece of software and saying bye-bye. We are going to be in this in the long haul together. So coming back to what we were talking about, really on that pre-sale side, it's the clients coming, what you said, Jared, like they've got this problem, they need to solve for it. Okay, here we have some technology that we believe is going to solve for your problem. And again, depending on what it is they're trying to do, we might start a trial process. Yeah. With some of this stuff, just try before you buy. Proofs in the pudding, all that jazz. Just really about like, okay, what is it you're trying to solve for? Let's really condense that problem down into what we call success criteria, your success plan. If by the end of however many weeks, let's say, or whatever time period makes sense based on the issues, it's a case of, if we get to the end, what would success look like? Let's work backwards with the technology and everything else.
So you're even managing their success before they even become a customer, I guess. You're helping them set their objectives to see if it will be a successful trial, let alone a successful ultimate end case, I guess.
Absolutely, because with anything, and coming back to your dad buying the bike, it's like, well, even then before he bought the bike, I'm sure he maybe like, got it, rang the bell, or have a sit down, I'll try it in, don't crash it into any other bike. Yeah. It's that same kind of process. For some people, it's going to work, and if you're kind of then navigating that journey together, to what you said, Jared, sometimes people don't actually realize halfway through what it is they were really trying to solve for. So sometimes we're going through the process together, and then objectives change. The goal changes, success changes, and it grows. And that's how, by sharing these, by working together and having the conversations about what it is you want to do and being strategic about it, that's how we really shape that journey.
What sort of objectives or critical success factors, or however you tend to frame them, have come up in the past, like when you've worked with clients? Where are they typically trying to get from and to as part of their purchase of Supercede? And what sort of things become, I guess, your raison d'etre with that client?
Yeah, so going into it from a sort of Supercede perspective, definitely if we're talking about, our seeded clients, in particular then the clients who are looking at their submission and their submission process, the reinsurance submission process, the pack preparation process, everything to do there. Traditionally, that process is something that can take up to 6 months.
Well, yeah.
I think we've probably talked
I'm acting
about
surprised.
it
I know this, obviously. Like, wow. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Something. So clients are really looking at that and going, okay, we've done this. We do this consistently year in, year out. Especially we're coming up to 1/1. They've started preparation back in June. They're still in the midst. Now we're in October. They're still in the midst of that process now. You're doing data cuts 6 months in advance because it's taking you that long to analyze, collate and validate your data. And, people are turning around now and going, we can't be spending that much time doing these sort of janitorial tasks that actually, technology can definitely do a lot of the heavy lifting for. Yeah. So it's really about one of the things being speed. Not the only thing, but definitely like how do we speed up the process around, being able to collate our data together. The next one being around sort of errors and, anomaly detection, let's say. Yeah. So for example, using Supercede, it's like you're putting data into a very complex, computer platform, and it's running these complex calculations in the background instantaneously. Therefore, it's analyzing your data set to know, if there are errors, in that underlying data, and then flagging them to the user straight away. Yeah. And this is something that could take someone, days or weeks to even just do on a manual process. Yeah. Whereas with the platform, then it's doing it in seconds, and being able to then take those anomalies. And again, no one's saying, I think we've talked about it, there's no such thing as a perfect data set. Yeah. But you can definitely have a data set that is good enough. You can go in and be like, I am confident that this data is the best data set I can get it to at this point in time. And
do you try and come up with metrics for that sort of thing? So it's like, we want to go from 6 months before to X time frame afterwards, or this quality of data before to this. Do you end up with measures like that in your conversations?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it comes down to, with client success as well, like, ROI. So, return on investment realization, like that's a real thing. We have to be demonstrating that to the client, to them, our client, our partner, I should say, for, the continued, evidence of it all. It's you can't measure it, does it exist? Yeah. Rhetorical question. Yeah. And I think then on the sort of using that example, it's like, yes, it's absolutely. It's like, what is the current process with the client in terms of like, what is it if we're talking about time or errors or whatever the thing is, let's try and get some quantifiable metrics so we can then reflect. So with a lot of clients, we'll sit down post 1/1 and we'll reflect on those metrics and see how we, measured up against them.
Well, I think that's super important when you set those objectives or success criteria up front, is you have something you're looking for. Because I think people can fall into the trap very easily of going, oh, we just want it to be better. And at the end, you're like, was it better? It's like a little bit better. But like, if you've not pointed towards a specific thing, saying we're trying to achieve these targets, we want our dates to look like this, our time to look like that, the number of errors we've found, or we want to be able to interrogate the data with this amount of additional insights, whatever you might have, you can then turn around and go, we have done all of these things. And you're able to sort of begin to quantify that ROI alongside your partner and saying, this is what you want to achieve. This is what we have done. This is, you're building that case to collectively rather than going, yeah, like, in a completely sliding scale with no numerical attachments to either end, you're saying better or worse. But setting those things out up front, one, helps you identify the clients, like what they care the most about, right? And I think when we look at our clients and clients across any sort of software purchase, will have different primary and secondary and tertiary objectives for what they buy. So if you don't have that conversation up front around what matters the most to them, you're sort of just, as you're trying to deliver success to them, you're kind of also shooting in the dark. So I think that upfront conversation is immensely valuable and super important to kick the process off.
Yeah, you got to align those North Stars.
Yeah.
Get to the point where you understand as client success what they want to achieve. And I guess to your point earlier, they don't always know very, in crystal terms what it is they're trying to achieve. But probably that's part of your challenge as well, as to actually sort of squeeze it out of them and say, okay, you've come to us with a reason, what is it? And probably after some weeks of workshops and things, you figure out you don't want to do stacking manually anymore, or you want to eliminate all rekeying from this process when you're doing your deals tracking, or you've got a company-wide mandate to reduce the number of spreadsheets in the organization by a half. I don't know what it would be, but I presumably that's quite an anchor point. And does it change year over year, I guess? If you get to the end of the first year and you say, well, we've achieved it, brilliant, or we've achieved most of it. Yeah. What do you want to do next year? Because we're, at least in our case, building new software, new features all the time. Does that come together as part of it?
Yeah, like it's definitely, as we said, it's a marathon, not a sprint. And it really is a journey we're going on. So we're using the term client, but I'm using that just so people can relate to that. But really, like, I talk to everyone on a partnership level. We're creating partnerships, and really, like, it's almost like I am working for the partner. It's almost like I am one of their employees almost. It's, it's helping shaping the strategy within their own function itself. So if we're talking about the seeded re teams, it's working with them on their long-term strategy for that seeded re function. And, we've got clients at various levels on various stages of their journey. Some who've been with us a long time, some who've only just joined us recently. So yeah, we're going to be at different stages. Some people, like, their appetite to do things or their appetite to change, either their team or they're actually just their company culture in general, just means, okay, we have to go slow and steady. That's absolutely fine. But let's just look at that as you set those milestones, set those success objectives, create wow moments as well. Wow moments for the people who are, signing this off from a revenue perspective, but also the people on the ground, like the people who are using this day to day, and giving them those wows, and that's really, a case of getting that buy-in as well for people to be more comfortable with me, to sit down and tell me their not their deepest thoughts and desires about tech, but really just help be there and help them shape the vision they want, and we give the technology to enable that vision.
So that's interesting, because it's more than just, it's not like onboarding success. It's not like client success means you now know how to use the software. It sounds like there's also relationships we have with clients and partners that's over the next several years, what are we trying to achieve? It's not just this onboarding. It's not just this upcoming renewal season, but it goes deeper than that. There's a long-term conversation happening.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's where do we want to be in 12 months? Where do we want to be in 24 months? We really are talking in years. When we're setting out these strategies, because again, we're dealing with like global insurance companies, like global broking companies. Like, these companies have long-term visions for where they want to get to. They have digital ambitions of where they want to get to. So how do I, from a client success perspective, come in, and how do I marry those visions together? And it's really then getting ingrained within the companies as well. It's like, right, who's driving your digital strategy? Let's talk to them. Yeah. Like, how do we embed what this seeded re team are trying to do, say, in isolation to start off with? And how does that then tie in nicely with your global, because it will be a global, digital strategy.
And me and Ben have seen that in sort of the software space as consultants as well. But a lot of times companies will have, like, here's what we want to look like in 5 years, but they have no clarity of, like, the component steps that will transpire over that journey. And I think it's a really important and really valuable part of what you do is to say, if that's where we want to be in 3 years, what does it look like 6 months before that and 6 months before that? And you sort of work your way back, and it allows you to have very pointed conversations with that team around, well, if we're going to get to this shared sort of North Star, which we've agreed on, we need to be doing this next, renewal season, or this summer, or whatever it is. And there's that shared buy-in. And I think, to to that client's comment, I think people really appreciate that. Right? It's not they know that you're invested in them getting the most out of it, not just, well, that's what we thought you'd want to do. Like, but you sort of leave them to their own devices. It's sort of coaching them and staying on project managing them, as you said earlier as well, like staying on top of what they're trying to achieve and ensuring that they get to that sort of end state in the time that they discussed and agreed.
You know, client success is the life force within the company. So everyone in the company does client success. I think that's a key thing as well to point out about client success. It's everyone's job within a company to put the client first. It's not just say be client centric. It's, you know, that you are. It's just ingrained in you as your role. I think we talk about how we work with the clients and, you know, features. It's always big one. Everyone loves features. Something we do, I think we do this really well, is we do QBRs.
Yes, which I've heard you've adopted your own version of QBRs.
I have.
As well, which is exciting.
Don't think I can take full credit for it because the great thing is there's so many wonderful people who do client success. I think the fun thing about it as well is it's not insurance or healthcare. Client success works across all things that exist in the world. So I'd listened to a lady who was all about the quality of the interactions you have, not the quantity.
Yep.
And I loved it. Like, I literally heard that. I'm like, I am adopting that. So I can't take full credit, but I've definitely then shaped it into what quality looks like from a reinsure tech perspective.
So quality business reviews rather than quarterly business reviews.
Yeah.
Very cool.
So again, I was just like, oh, do I need to spell that out, you know, with the cues being like, it's not quarterly, it's whenever you want them.
Yeah.
And that's it. It's letting the client then decide on their cadence with us. Like, how often do you want to meet? Where do you want to meet? How do you want that interaction to be? Like, in person, on Zoom,
and
down the pub, like I said, wherever you feel most comfortable.
Yeah.
And then really it's a case of spacing them out between the Supercede squad of people that we have, like, you know, these expertise people that we have. It's like we have an amazing product function as well. So client success, one of the key things is, yes, we can listen, understand and translate what needs to make sense from the client from a product perspective. But we do one better, actually. We bring the product function to the table with the client in those quality review meetings. It's your roadmap. It is always the client's roadmap, no matter what. So it's bringing those people wherever they are in the world, as you say, Ben, those global teams, and then being like, okay, what is it you're trying to solve for? You might get people saying, we'd love a button here. And you're like, interesting. Okay, but why do you want the button there? Right? And then, you know, I think we go into a lovely 5 whys, maybe.
Yeah.
And you realize then it's not the button that they wanted. It's more like
they're trying to solve a pain point or something that's been missed. Yeah.
Exactly. Like, there's usually a bigger reason as to why they want this button. And then it's really a case of, you know, our lovely product team, like, really just dissecting that and understanding that and building what matters to them. Not just a button, but building the way of how this thing is actually going to help their lives.
Yeah, because it might be something hilarious, I was going to say, where it's like, we need the button so that when we send our things off to the offshore team over here and they spend 8 weeks doing manual work to turn it into this other thing, that it then goes into the system. Okay, so that's why we want the button. It's like, or we could automate all of that 8 weeks for you instead. Would you prefer that?
Yeah.
Or do you just want the button?
Well, it's the thing that's sort of jumping out to me is there's this thread of intentionality across all of this, right? From setting goals to not just saying, oh, we're going to meet every quarter and just cover whatever we cover. It's like even those meetings and those updates have a purpose, and it's all very much designed with this deep intentionality of what our client wants to achieve, and making sure that there's this partnership angle to them getting the most out. So that, I think that's something that really jumps out and differs quite a lot from what could be considered very lazy. It's like, oh, we've got the call center and we just make sure that someone will always answer your call within 5 minutes. Or like, there's no intentionality for that. There's no driving force of what you're trying to deliver to a client. It's just a metric you set on some sort of, criteria for delivery versus when you set it out with the objective being success. That's all very intentional from the point in which you engage, which again is we talked about is before they even are clients, talking about what that will look like and how we help guide and manage your success there. So I think it's a really important piece. And for other startups that we know in the space, like again, it's one you're seeing more of them adopt because the importance of this function for the success of the business as well.
And I have massive pins and needles in my legs, so video watchers, please just ignore me wriggling about whilst we continue this conversation. Yeah. But I did want to ask you, Jess, when you think about the various clients you've worked with on these journeys, are there any sort of, you don't have to name the clients, but any standout success stories? Wouldn't be client success if we didn't have success stories, I guess. Like what are you really happy about, or things that you've been able to achieve, journeys you've been on with clients that maybe going right back to the beginning, I've never bought technology before, I've never had a client success person before. Any highlights that stand out?
Well, we're definitely going to get a few highlights. I think we're definitely going to go more, as we have more and more clients, we're going to get more into those success stories in detail. So I think touching on it on a high level today, we definitely, with one of the clients in particular, if we talk about sort of that error and anomaly detection, I think definitely they spotted with their underlying data. And we don't want to use the word bad, but they definitely recognize like their underlying data, this data could be better. And it just takes us such a long time to just get it into a state that we're happy with. Now with the error, like, you know, the error, the cleansing validation that happens as a first off with the platform, translating that into the anomalies. This particular client then was able to just take all of them because you can, they come up straight away on the platform. You can then, you know, send them across digitally to that person because you can share everything digitally internally with your colleagues. And we're able to then give that information to the sort of the data teams behind the scenes to be able to make changes to the core data in their, you know, policy admin system. So that means then when they rerun the data, it'll be, you know, error-free as a word. And that's really fantastic as a success story.
That's a really important component that we talk about in the industry, this sort of garbage in, garbage out data challenge. And one of the most difficult parts that clients have always faced is trying to like clean it into the source system. But it's interesting because it's not sort of that scenario you outlined isn't like in our bullet of like things you do on Supercede kind of selling points as such. No. But what you found is a way for that client to then use one of the things that exists in the platform that then helps fundamentally improve the underlying data that they have in their core systems. Yeah. So like their source of truth is now more accurate because of how they're using some of our software. And like that's a really like helpful way to think about the role that you and the team play is not just what we do on the tin, but like what other challenges does your organization face that we're able to help support you in achieving. So that's a super interesting one from that perspective. Yeah. What's your second favorite one?
To be honest, I do have loads, but I think the next one being around stacking. I think if we've explained stacking before, it's where you've got policies that I think, Ben, do you want to give a quick you guys want to like summarize what stacking is? There's
a hilarious running joke, isn't there, that nobody wants to be the one who has to explain this quite complex situation, which I think runs to the heart of why we ended up building software for it, because there's not really this easy, hard and fast rule for the way it works a lot of the time, but effectively you're trying to spot policies that belong in a group where you don't want to accidentally double count or not double count something as a result of them belonging to the same family. There's a few different ways that it can arrive that we won't go into, but what we've typically found is that when you've got like a massive long border of thousands of policies and the same group of policies occurring in a group, people who are trying to calculate their total limit or various other elements are accidentally counting parts of the same group multiple times when they shouldn't, or vice versa. And that's basically stacking in a nutshell we try and fix.
Yeah. Exactly. And that process, that is definitely one of the, when we come to the sheet of things, on the sort of sales list of things that we say we do well. And that's it, because we've identified that is a core problem issue for everyone. It's something that is really complicated, really difficult to do, even more difficult to do just on Excel, and to do manually as well. So you have some people where it could take 3 weeks on average for a single treaty to just go through and manually, if you say manually using your eyes and Excel, to go through that process. Whereas on Supercede, we have had a client where they said to us it took a week and a half. So this is a recent example, because we're currently in 1/1 prep season. They said last year it took them a week and a half for this particular treaty. Using Supercede, they got it done in 4 hours.
Nice. It's always good when the metric changes, right?
Yeah.
It's not like instead of
the quantum
a week and a half, it's like half a week is like, no, we're now measuring in hours instead.
Yeah, and I think even the reason it was 4 hours and not even less, it was just because I think they were trying to, it's so like, has it worked? Is it right? Am I sure?
Yeah.
It's that, you're doubting yourself. You're like, no, it can't be that quick. No, it can't have actually detected all those stacks. No, it can't have actually allowed me to do this thing that took me so long last year. And I think that's it. It's just seeing those wows when they come back to people.
Yeah, it's funny. Universally, I think we always find more than we expect to find as well, right? Like we think we're going to do a reconciliation between what they had last year and what Supercede finds, but Supercede always finds more than the manual methods find.
Yeah.
It always finds more, and that's always that's an interesting conversation. And that usually comes as we're usually 3/4 way through the trial, and we're reconciling the data, and we're picking up things that, like this is why tech, having a tech solution is handy. It's just doing those complex things in seconds, as opposed to, we love Excel in some cases, but not for doing these complex tasks.
It's got some function, but increasingly less in our space now. But I think it's an excellent spot to end on. Jess.
No, I have one more thing that we must do before we end. Jess, we presumed, due to your fame and recognition in the client success space within Reinsurance, that everybody knows everything about you and how you got into client success at Supercede. So normally we should have done that at the beginning, but we
should have done that at the beginning.
Do you want to tell us a bit about how you're secretly an industry person who's now a software industry software person?
So, oh God.
Where did you start? Because you started in insurance, I seem to remember.
I did start in insurance. I started over 12 years ago. I was a broker in Australia. That's where I found the lovely world of insurance. I am not Australian. I think we've all sort of realised now that I am from Dublin,
that
Ireland.
doesn't track.
An Australian accent all this time.
I was out there just for a couple of months for college, uni, depending on where you're from. Refer to it as college or university. And really liked it out there. Met someone who was a broker, told me how amazing it was. So I did a stint of broking and underwriting while I lived out there. Found out about this magical place called Lloyd's of London, and the fact that when I was placing business over there overseas, the broker had to walk in to Lloyd's. What is he doing? They have to walk in? I loved this story, so then applied for graduate programs over here in the UK. So then started on the journey. I think same time we all came to London at the same time. So then became an insurance underwriter. Did lots of things in between, because you're on the grad scheme. You do claims, you do finance, crossed many lines of business over the years. Even did a stint in sort of portfolio solutions and delegated business. So that was really fantastic, but always had an ear on the tech side of things. So getting into the tech world sort of 4.5 years ago. I haven't looked back since. I think when, I was talking with Tom about Supercede and about client success, I was doing account management at the time. And the first thing I said to Tom was, it's a bit of a wanky title, isn't it? Kind of to this point of actually I didn't myself understand the true power of client success. So jumped on trusty Google Had a Google and I was absolutely hooked. And I was like, yes, I want to help clients win. I want to help clients be successful, and I haven't looked back.
Yeah.
What's a pirate's favorite client success metric?
Oh, I think I've got it.
I don't know. I don't know.
Go on.
ARR.
Excellent.
Perfect. All right. Wonderful. Well, thank you, Jess, for joining us on the podcast. And everyone, we will see you next time. Thanks, everyone.